What's going on, everyone? Hopefully you are excited for some new spoilers, because today I think this is probably the most insane card we have in the entirety of Star Wars Unlimited yet. I know I said that with Endless Legion, which is the 14 cost event if you hadn't seen that, but this one is pretty absurd, and well, you'll just see it when we get to it. Before we talk about some of the cards, guys, I just wanted to mention really quickly, I know a lot of you have been asking about Magic content in some of my comments and some messages. I actually decided to start another channel talking about Magic and, well, really playing a lot of drafts and the new sets and such. So if you want to check out that, I'll leave a link to it down below in the new video. So feel free to check me out over there as well. I play a lot of trading card games. What can I say? Anyways, let's talk about some of the cards today. And we're going to start off with a brand new leader in Finn. So Finn here is a heroism, vigilance, well, rare leader. And he has an action to defeat a friendly upgrade on a unit. If you do, give a shield token to that unit. His flip side is a 5 to deploy, so pretty solid early deployment. 4/6 fringe trooper. And on attack, you may defeat a friendly upgrade on a unit, then you give a shield token to that unit. So I'm trying to figure out where this guy actually has his place, because if you look at a lot of the other kind of upgrade synergy leaders, or things that care about upgrades, or things that are caring about this sort of, okay, I want to go ahead and either put upgrades on my units or get some extra value, I think of Rey and I think of Gar Saxon. Gar Saxon's the villainy side of things, so of course his is a little bit different. But I do think Gar's static leader ability to just give you a +1/+0 bonus, period, if you have an upgrade on a unit, is really powerful and much more universally useful. Rey, on the other hand, is the heroism side of things, and she doesn't directly say, we care about upgrades, but she's giving you the option to give experience tokens to these 2 or less powered units, which is basically all the kind of units that you're trying to use in your shield associated deck. Like if you think of Rose Tico, right? The 2/6 shielded that allows you to attack and defeat a shield token on a unit, and you get 2 experience tokens. Well, boom, Rey works perfectly with her, because you can go ahead and get an experience token on her, and then she becomes, well, a 5/9, which is crazy if she doesn't get damaged at all. But then I started to think, okay, maybe there's some sort of way to get some value going with Finn. And the initial thought I had was, okay, is there any sort of way to get a bunch of experience tokens out so that we can trade experience tokens for shield tokens? But then I was like, do we even want to do that? Because if we're doing that, then our units are probably going to be a little bit weaker. I will say one of the big ones is Finn works really well with Rose Tico, which makes sense in terms of lore, I suppose. But overall, there's not really a whole lot of other units that I'm extremely excited to put in my Finn deck. There are some shielded options, right? If you look back in set 1, there are a lot of like the Wilderness Fighter, I believe it's called, a 2/4 for 3 that is a shield token. You can defeat that and maybe get another shield token or whatever. But like there are a lot of shield token based units that don't really have an advantage towards Finn's leader ability. I don't think there's a lot of things that really work too well. And even if they might work well, like, again, Rose Tico is the perfect example I see, where you can exchange these shield tokens for experience tokens and then back to shield tokens. Well, it's not really all that common, because I think one of the best ways to actually get upgrades on your units is to play upgrades, not experience tokens, or to have a leader that puts experience tokens on your units, like Rey. So I'm thinking that Rey is going to be a little bit stronger than Finn, and I've even played with Rey quite a few times. You might see a video on that soon. I actually found her to be pretty powerful, and I don't think Finn fits super well so far. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below about Finn. Next up, we have a couple of other new cards to talk about. We have Resourceful Pursuers. It is a 5 resource ground unit in Cunning, a 5/6 bounty hunter with Saboteur. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Not super exciting. If you look at the stat line, it's solid. Nothing to complain about there. I mean, a 5/6 for 5 is not amazing, but it's not terrible. This is much more of a limited card for me. This is a card that I'll take in my draft and be okay and happy with. You know, it's just going to be a nice little playable that I'm going to add to my deck. And in some cases, the Saboteur is going to be pretty nice, right? Because defeating shields could be relevant in this set. I think more so than the first set, with the exception of maybe Luke. Right, maybe Luke was more relevant in the first set. I don't know. Saboteur doesn't usually come into play like every time. It's like a decent chunk. I would say like 30% of the time you're like, oh, this card has Saboteur, and that matters, right, for Sentinel purposes. But this card doesn't look particularly strong for any reason. It's just a stat stick, and it has Saboteur. So I don't think this card's going to be all that relevant for any sort of specific deck. We also have Inspiring Mentor. Now, this card is a lot different, okay? And this is a card where, when we were talking about Finn, makes me think that, okay, Finn actually could have some options, right? Because it's a 2-resource upgrade with Command Heroism, attached to a non-vehicle unit, and on attack / when defeated, give an experience token to another friendly unit, and it gets +1/+1 straight up. So this is something that I think synergizes really well with Finn, for example, right? You play this on your units, it gets +1/+1, it's probably not going to be able to be killed, and then you attack, you get another experience token, and then you can defeat those experience tokens for some extra value. Heck, you can even go ahead and defeat the Inspiring Mentor for shield tokens. So I'm like, okay, maybe that's something really cool, Finn. But you can also just use this straight up in, like, Ray, for example. Well, this does give +1/+1. It might grow it out of Ray upgrade synergies. You could just use this as a way to just get a bunch of experience tokens out. Remember, if you play this and they kill your unit immediately, at least you get to give an experience token to another unit. Heck, if you play this on a unit that's ready up and you have another unit, then you get an experience token to that friendly unit, that other friendly unit. And then if they kill this, you get another experience token. So you get 2 experience tokens out of the deal, which is actually a pretty good deal. I'm pretty interested in trying out this card. If you look at the other 2 resource upgrades, like Devotion, for example, they don't actually have like a high stat line. Like Devotion is a super played card. Like that card is everywhere, but it only gives +1/+1. You don't actually need a ton of stats for a card to be good. You need the effect to be powerful. And I think Devotion's a little bit better than this, at least in the current meta, because Restore 2 is so much more important than giving an experience token. And if this said you could give an experience token to any unit, I would be a little bit higher because you could give it to itself. But the fact that you need this, a unit, and another unit for this card to be good is where I see a little bit of problems with this card, right? Because remember, you play a unit, let's say your turn 1, you play a unit. Turn 2, you could just play Devotion and get some value out of it, right? That's how that kind of curve works. But in this card, yeah, you can play Inspiring Mentor, but it just gives it +1/+1. You don't actually give an experience token to anything because you have nothing to give an experience token to, assuming you don't have a 1-drop. Of course, you have a 1-drop that changes things, but this is a way that you could also give upgrades to other units. So I think in set 2, when we see things like, potentially Finn decks or the Ray decks or any sort of upgrade synergy deck, this is where it starts to get a lot more interesting because of the fact that you could pass out upgrades pretty freely with the on attack triggers. So I could see that being somewhat useful. Overall, I see some potential with this card, but I'm a little bit lower on this than some of the other rares that we've talked about. And I do think Devotion, at least right now, I would say Devotion's better, despite this being a rare. But that's not all, guys. And this is what's going to wrap up the video here. The final card we're going to talk about. I take it back. We actually have 2 more cards to talk about after we talk about the final card, or before we talk about the final card. I forgot that Thor had a video here. I'll leave a link to Thor's video. He had 2 new exclusive cards to talk about. First one's actually Pillage here. Choose a player. They discard 2 cards from their hand. It's kind of like the first half of Smoke and Cinders for those of you that saw my video the other day. Smoke and Cinders ends up being a very, very situational card. And this card is a lot more specific, right? It's a card to take out essentially your opponent's hand. And I could see this being somewhat useful. And I could see this being more universal than like a Smoke and Cinders because, well, when you're fighting a control matchup or potentially some matchup that cares about cards in their hand that you can play slow enough to actually take advantage of this, I could see some value coming from Pillage, right? Getting 2 cards from an opponent's hand is pretty nice. And having this come down on 4 resources is a lot more interesting. But I do think this card is much more of a card where you're using in specific matchups than a card you're just generally putting in your deck. So I see it more of as a sideboard card than anything against, the more slower matchups where you can actually get some card advantage rolling. He also has one other card to talk about, and that is going to be Unrefusable Offer. This is an upgrade. It's a 2-costed upgrade with Cunning. Attached to a non-leader unit, the attached unit gains bounty. Play this unit for free under your control, and then just play ready. And at the start of the regroup phase, defeat it. So this one's really interesting. So essentially, you get a bounty that gives you a sneak attack effect, but you don't have to pay the cost. So if you look at this and you think, okay, we have a bounty that allows you to play things. Again, you play the unit so you can trigger the when played abilities, and you can have the when defeated abilities on that card, and you get that card for an attack. So let's say you play this on, I don't know, like a I think Thor in his video mentioned like a Cobb Vanth, which is a card that has a really sweet when defeated ability. That's really, really nice with this because you get to attack with it. But remember, you can also get things like, well, heck, Darth Vader, right? Play the unit. You get to ambush it. That's crazy, right? Let's say you use this in Boba Green, and you're just seeing if you can get some value out of it, and your opponent has a Darth Vader on the opponent's side of the battlefield. You play this on Darth Vader, you overwhelming barrage, let's say, you because you're on that 7 resources, you kill their Vader, you get to replay Vader, you get to trigger his ambush effect, and the fact that he is going to give you, you know, that extra unit. Of course, the ambush effect doesn't necessarily matter as much because the enters are probably ready anyways, but that's the type of mechanics that you can see with this card. I could see this being a very swingy card, and I could see this being played in things like Boba Green, right? I could see, you know, someone ECLing out a Steadfast Battalion, or just, you know, playing Boba and overwhelming barrage. You have ways to kill things off and claim these bounties, and you're going to be able to get something pretty nice with this. Ideally, of course, you could just play that unit that, you know, you got from the Unrefusable offer, and then hit your opponent's unit and trade with it. And now you've essentially killed their unit, got their unit back, and then killed their other unit, which is really, really powerful for 2 resources, right? I think that in some cases, this is going to be pretty mediocre, right? It's definitely a situational card. And what I mean by that is if you put it in your main deck, there are going to be games when this card is absolutely dead. But I think the upside, unlike Pillage, which we talked about before, which I think is also situational, this card has such a high upside that even when you're playing this and you don't have a situation to use it, you can just resource it. And then the times when it does come into play, it's going to be so powerful that it's going to maybe even win you the game. So this is a card that's very, very swingy, and we haven't seen this type of effect yet. But I'm excited to play with this, and I think that there's some really, really big potential with this one. Now we get to talk about the final card of today, and that is, well, another double aspect card. And my oh my, is this card just absurd. 6 resources, double cunning, final showdown. It's an event. Ready each unit you control at the start of the regroup phase. You lose the game. Wow. So these double aspect cards are just the craziest cards we've seen so far in all of Star Wars Unlimited. Like, if you look at the old double aspect cards that we have in our current set, they're just straight up value cards, right? They're just good. But these ones are extremely situational. Like, if you find the right deck for it, it's going to break the game. Otherwise, it's completely worthless. And Final Showdown finds itself in that same position, right? Let's say you're playing double yellow Boba, and you're in a situation where you've played your Boba flip turn, you've gone ahead and you've attacked with everything, boom, 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 boom. You go to your next turn, you play your Fet's Fire Spray or whatever. That's the kind of curve that I'm looking at. But let's say you decided, oh, maybe I'm gonna play a Final Showdown on that turn instead. Because that's the turn you might want to do it. Well, you can ready up your Boba leader, maybe a couple units, 1 to 2 units, and you can get in for a ton of damage. Now, mind you, this with Boba is pretty nice because even if you do play this when you have 6 resources, if you do attack with Boba and such, let's say you attack with Boba, ready up your units, attack with Boba again, you also have more units to, or more resources to play, let's say a cunning, right? And I mean cunning as in like the actual cunning card for 4 resources. So there's some potential here, I think, specifically in Boba, but you need a hyper aggressive deck. And I think playing this for 8 resources is a little weak, mainly because if you look at the kind of removal suite in the overall game, that's usually when control decks start to flip the switch, and you're probably not going to have all that many units to actually ready up, right? So I don't see this being all that great for 8 resources, which is something that we have to consider because there are a lot of double aspect cards that aren't really playable, you know, if you're playing the extra cost, and they're not playable because you don't have that, well, double aspect base and leader. So the one deck that immediately, as I mentioned earlier, is Boba Yellow, and I don't see this being a card that you actually want to put in Boba Yellow, because the thing is, the resources that it comes down on doesn't actually match up well with what you're trying to do with Boba. That turn is the Fet's Fire Spray turn, right? And that is a card that you're not going to cut from that deck. That is the ender of the game. And to be honest, Final Showdown's probably getting in for less damage than a Fet's Fire Spray will in a lot of game scenarios, right? Yes, you can ready up your Boba a second time, but remember, this forces you to attack with all of your units, then play it, then attack with them again to get any sort of effect. And then, because you lose the game in the next turn, you need to go ahead and end that game then. That is when the game needs to end. Now, again, as I see some people trying to try out this card, I'm going to try it out as well. The time where I see this being really, really good is in situations where maybe your opponent's trying to race you and you're playing an aggro deck, they're playing an aggro deck. Maybe you did some small trades in the early game. That's where Final Showdown becomes a card where you losing the game doesn't matter on the next turn, because this card, while in most cases Fet's Fire Spray is going to get in more damage, if you're playing an aggro mirror, there are a lot of times where it's two ships sailing in the night and you just pass by each other and just hitting their base. And this is the card that might swing it and end the game that turn, because you can certainly do that with Boba Fett. Again, because Boba Fett's so tanky and is able to kind of get in for a ton of damage, if you just play this on turn 5, right, with your Boba Fett leader and one other unit, if you're able to attack with both of those, that's more damage than a Fet's Fire Spray, and that could be relevant in some situations. Because as I mentioned, it's all about that Fet's Fire Spray and comparing it to that, because that's what you're going to see on that turn, right? That is the card that's going to have to compete with Final Showdown, because you're going to compare, okay, how much damage can I do with Final Showdown? How much damage can I do with Fet's Fire Spray? Okay, Final Showdown is going to give me more damage. It's going to end the game. Fet's Fire Spray is just a damage short. And that's where I see some interesting kind of potential with this. As this is all about readying up units, I don't see this being played in any other deck besides aggro decks. Maybe a mid-range shell where you can kind of have one big swing, but the kind of potential for that is like you get to like 9 or 10 or 11 resources, you play a unit, like let's say a Kanan, right? Like let's say you're playing, I don't know, well, that's not true because you kind of need a double yellow. I mean, there's double yellow mid-range doesn't exist, let's say, but let's say you're playing like, I don't know, Luke yellow or some sort of mid-range deck with yellow, like a Palp yellow, for example, and you're on like 12 resources. You play this for 8. You can play another 4 resource card before that. So let's say you play, I don't know, like an Emperor's Royal Guard or Assistant Patrol Craft, which is not even in Palp yellow, so that's not even possible. But something of that nature where you're playing a 4 resource unit, and then you play Final Showdown, and then you have Palpatine on the board, and you've already attacked with Palpatine, and like let's say, I don't know, like a Change of Heart or something like that before in the previous turn. So then this turn you can actually just kill your opponent straight up. Maybe, but that seems like more of a win more. Whereas the card where I see this actually having an effect on the game is in like an aggro deck where it actually allows you to race. So maybe a sideboard card, but it is very cool. And I'm happy that they're printing cards like this where it just says you lose the game the next turn. These extra turns essentially, or extra combat steps are really interesting to me. And I'm really excited about all their other double aspect cards that they're going to be coming out with, because we should have more legendaries to come. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below, guys. This card is absolutely sweet. And let me know if you can think of anything to go with this card to make it truly, truly strong. But I'll be here tomorrow giving you guys some more videos, and I'll see you all then.